I found a Halloween invitation slipped under my door at midnight, handwritten, in my sister's handwriting. But here's the thing. My sister disappeared 20 years ago on Halloween night from a house where an entire family vanished in 1994. And when I researched that address, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. People have been disappearing from that house every 10 years for over a century. 37 people, gone without a trace. And now, the invitation was calling me there at midnight on Halloween. But before I tell you what I found when I walked into that house, subscribe to our channel right now. For you, it's just one click. But for us, it's the fuel we need to keep finding and sharing incredible stories like this one. Have you subscribed yet? Thank you for being part of our community. Now, let me tell you what happened when I arrived at 1428 Maple Street. The envelope slid under my apartment door at exactly 11:47 p.m. on October 30th, making a soft whisking sound that pulled me from a restless sleep. I lay there in the darkness of my Chicago studio, heart hammering against my ribs, listening to the silence that followed, a silence so complete it felt deliberate, as if whoever had delivered it was holding their breath on the other side of my door, waiting. No footsteps retreating down the hallway, no voices, nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of sirens that never really stopped in this neighborhood. I counted to 60, then 90, my hand reaching for the baseball bat I kept beside my bed, a habit I'd developed after years of living alone in a city that didn't sleep. When I finally worked up the courage to check the peephole, the hallway was empty, illuminated only by the flickering fluorescent light that the landlord kept promising to fix. I told myself it was probably just another takeout menu or a notice from building management about the broken elevator. But something cold and insistent crawled up my spine, whispering that I already knew this was different. When I finally opened the door, chain still attached, bat gripped in my other hand, I found a cream-colored envelope lying on the worn carpet. My name written in elegant script that made my breath catch, Violet Chen, not Violet Chen, apt 4B, or resident, or current occupant. Just my name, written by someone who knew exactly who lived behind this door, someone who had taken the time to form each letter with care. My hands trembled as I brought the envelope inside, locking the door behind me and checking the chain twice before I allowed myself to examine it more closely. The paper was expensive, the kind with a subtle texture that spoke of wedding invitations and formal announcements, and it smelled faintly of something I couldn't quite place. Old books, maybe, or dried flowers. I turned it over 3 times before opening it. Some part of me already knowing that whatever was inside would change everything, would crack open the carefully constructed life I'd built over the past 20 years. The invitation was handwritten on cream cardstock, the same elegant script, each word perfectly formed. Halloween party, midnight, 1428, Maple Street. I read it 3 times, each reading making my chest tighter, my breath shorter, because 1428. Maple Street was a name I hadn't heard spoken aloud in 2 decades, a name my parents had forbidden us to mention after we moved away from Millbrook. That house had been the subject of whispered conversations and nervous glances throughout my childhood in the suburb 30 miles west of here, a place where children crossed the street rather than walk past its overgrown yard. Everyone knew the story, the way small towns always know their ghost stories. The Hartley family had vanished on Halloween night 1994, leaving behind a half-carved pumpkin on the porch, a pot of candy corn cooling on the stove, and 3 place settings at the dinner table with food still warm on the plates. No bodies were ever found. No blood, no signs of struggle, no ransom demands. They simply ceased to exist, as if they'd stepped through a door into nothing. But it was the handwriting that made me sink to the floor, my back against the door, the invitation clutched in shaking fingers, tears already blurring my vision. I would have recognized those loops and flourishes anywhere, even after 2 decades of trying to forget them. Even in my nightmares where I still sometimes saw her writing in her journal at the kitchen table. They belonged to my sister, Iris, who had disappeared on Halloween night 2004, exactly 10 years after the Hartleys, when I was 10 years old and she was 17. The police had searched for months, following leads that went nowhere, interviewing everyone who'd ever known her, dragging the lake at Miller's Park twice while I watched from my mother's car, praying they wouldn't find anything. My parents had aged a decade in a single year, their marriage crumbling under the weight of grief and unanswered questions, their bedroom becoming a place of muffled crying and arguments that stopped abruptly whenever I walked past. Eventually, the case went cold, filed away with all the other unsolved disappearances that haunt small towns across America, and we became that family, the one people whispered about in grocery store aisles, the one whose tragedy made others grateful for their own intact lives. I'd spent the last 20 years trying to build a life separate from that tragedy, moving to the city the day I turned 18, becoming a data analyst because numbers were clean and logical and never disappeared without explanation, dating men who didn't ask too many questions about why I never went home for the holidays. Now, holding this impossible invitation, I felt all those carefully constructed walls beginning to crack, felt the grief I'd buried rising up like floodwater, threatening to drown me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my laptop, diving down rabbit holes I'd avoided for years, searching for anything new about either case, my coffee growing cold beside me as the hours slipped past. The internet had changed since I'd last looked. I'd been a child then, limited to whatever my parents' dial-up connection could access, and information that had once been locked away in newspaper archives was now just a few clicks away. I found articles about the Hartleys, Thomas and Patricia, both 42, and their daughter Lily, who would have been exactly my age if she'd lived, who played soccer and got straight A's and wanted to be a veterinarian. They'd been a normal family by all accounts. Thomas worked in insurance. Patricia taught piano lessons from their home. Lily had a best friend named Emma who still left flowers at the memorial every year. On Halloween night 1994, they'd been preparing for trick-or-treaters when they simply ceased to exist. The front door left standing open, the porch light on, a bowl of candy waiting for children who would run screaming when they saw the empty house. No bodies were ever found. No evidence of foul play. The house had been left exactly as it was, like they'd stepped out for a moment and never returned, and after the investigation concluded with no answers, it had simply been locked up, left to decay because no one wanted to buy a house where an entire family had vanished into thin air. I found fewer articles about Iris, mostly because our parents had begged the media to leave us alone after the first few months, after reporters had camped outside our house and followed me to school and turned our tragedy into entertainment. But I remembered everything the articles didn't say. How she'd been acting strange in the weeks before she disappeared, secretive and distracted, spending hours in the library and coming home with armfuls of books about local history. How she'd started asking questions about the Hartley house, which had been sitting empty and decaying for a decade by then, its windows broken by vandals and its yard overgrown with weeds. How she'd told me, just 2 days before she vanished, that she'd figured something out, something important. But she needed to be sure before she told anyone, because she didn't want to scare me. I'd been too young to understand what she meant, too focused on my own 10-year-old concerns, a math test I was worried about, a friend who'd said something mean at recess, and by the time I was old enough to realize I should have pressed her for details, it was too late. She'd gone to a Halloween party that night, or at least that's what she'd told our parents, kissing my forehead before she left and promising to bring me back some candy. She never came home. Her car was found 3 days later in the parking lot of the old Millbrook Library, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat with her wallet and phone untouched. It was as if she'd simply evaporated, leaving behind nothing but questions and the smell of her lavender shampoo on the pillow I'd stolen from her room. At 3 a.m., fueled by my 4th cup of coffee and a growing sense of dread, I found something that made my breath catch in my throat. A blog post from 2019, written by an amateur true crime enthusiast named Marcus Webb, a name that would later prove significant, who'd noticed a pattern I'd never seen mentioned anywhere else. Every 10 years on Halloween night, going back to 1974, someone disappeared from Millbrook. Not every year, just every 10th year, like clockwork, like some cosmic alarm going off that only certain people could hear. 1974. A teenage boy named Marcus Webb, the blogger's uncle, who'd vanished while walking home from a party. 1984, a woman named Caroline Foster and her 8-year-old son, who'd disappeared from their home while carving pumpkins. 1994, the Hartley family. 2004. My sister. The blogger had tried to investigate further, but hit dead ends everywhere, as if someone had deliberately obscured the connections, as if there was an active effort to keep these cases separate in the public consciousness. The post ended with a chilling question. What happens in 2014? And what will happen in 2024? I scrolled down to the comment section, my heart pounding, and found only one comment, posted just 3 days ago by an anonymous user. The cycle breaks this year. Come to 1428 Maple Street at midnight on Halloween. Bring Violet Chen. She's the key to ending this. She's the only one who can finish what her sister started. My name. Right there, in a comment on a 5-year-old blog post that I'd never seen before tonight, written by someone who knew not just who I was, but what role I was supposed to play in whatever was about to happen. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was a trap, that I should take the invitation straight to the police and let them handle it, that walking into an abandoned house at midnight on Halloween was exactly the kind of stupid decision that got people killed in horror movies. But the part of me that had spent 20 years wondering what happened to my sister, the part that still woke up sometimes expecting to see her in the kitchen making her terrible coffee, the part that had never really stopped being that 10-year-old girl waiting for her sister to come home, that part knew I was going to that house. I had to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. I had to know if Iris had suffered, if she'd been afraid, if she'd thought of me in those final moments. And if someone had taken her, if someone had hurt her, then God help them, because I was done being the victim of someone else's mystery. I spent the rest of the night preparing, moving on autopilot while my mind raced through possibilities and worst-case scenarios. I charged my phone fully and packed a portable charger. I made sure my pepper spray was in my purse and added a knife from my kitchen, a heavy chef's knife that felt substantial in my hand. I wrote a detailed email to my best friend Keisha explaining everything. The invitation, the blog post, the pattern of disappearances, and set it to send automatically if I didn't cancel it by 2 a.m. on November 1st. I included photos of the invitation and screenshots of everything I'd found, creating a digital trail in case I became the next person to vanish into whatever darkness had swallowed my sister. I pulled out the box I kept hidden in my closet, the one filled with Iris's things that my parents had given me when they'd finally accepted she wasn't coming home, when they'd moved to Arizona to escape the Midwest winters, and the memories that lurked in every corner of our old house. Her journal, filled with her looping handwriting and sketches in the margins. Her favorite hoodie, a faded Northwestern sweatshirt that still somehow smelled like her lavender shampoo even after all these years. A photo of the two of us at Navy Pier the summer before she disappeared. Both of us grinning at the camera, ice cream melting down our hands, the Ferris wheel bright against the blue sky behind us. I looked at that photo for a long time, studying Iris's face, trying to see some hint of what was coming, some shadow of the decision she would make that Halloween night. But she just looked happy, carefree, like a normal 17-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her. At the bottom of the box was something I'd almost forgotten about, a small brass key on a silver chain that Iris had worn around her neck in those final weeks, tucked under her shirt like a secret. She'd never told me what it opened, and I'd kept it all these years like a talisman, a physical reminder that there were still secrets waiting to be uncovered, still pieces of the puzzle I hadn't found. I slipped the chain over my head, feeling the weight of the key settle against my chest, still warm from being in the box, and wondered if this was what she'd felt, wearing it those last days. As dawn broke over Chicago, painting my apartment in shades of orange and purple that reminded me of Halloween candy and childhood innocence, I made my decision. I would go to 1428 Maple Street at midnight, just as the invitation demanded. I would walk into whatever trap or revelation waited for me there, because after 20 years of questions and nightmares and the hollow ache of not knowing, I was finally going to get answers. And if those answers led me to whoever had taken my sister, then they would learn that the quiet, traumatized little girl had grown into someone who wouldn't stop until she had justice, or revenge, I called in sick to work on Halloween morning, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep, and the tears I'd finally allowed myself to shed around 5 a.m. when the weight of everything had become too much to bear. My manager, a kind woman named Priya, who'd never pried into my past despite my obvious reluctance to discuss my family, simply told me to take care of myself and not to worry about the Henderson account. Her voice warm with concern that made me feel guilty for lying. As I hung up, I wondered if she'd remember this conversation when the police inevitably came asking questions, if she'd recall any hint that I was about to do something reckless and possibly fatal, if she'd blame herself for not pushing harder to find out what was wrong. The drive to Millbrook took 45 minutes in light traffic, and every mile felt like traveling backward through time, like I was driving toward my own past, toward the moment when my life had split into before and or after. I hadn't been back since my parents sold our house and moved to Arizona 5 years ago. Unable to bear another Midwest winter in the town where they'd lost everything, where every street corner held a memory of Iris. The suburbs sprawled out in familiar patterns that made my chest ache with recognition. Strip malls and chain restaurants. Elementary schools with colorful playgrounds where children laughed and played. The kind of safe, boring landscape where terrible things weren't supposed to happen. Where families were supposed to grow old together and children were supposed to outlive their parents. But I knew better. I'd learned at 10 years old that monsters didn't just live in cities or dark forests. They lived in places exactly like this, hiding behind white picket fences and friendly waves, wearing the faces of neighbors and teachers and people you trusted. Millbrook hadn't changed much, except for the new Target where the old movie theater used to be, the theater where Iris had taken me to see my first PG-13 movie, sneaking me in even though I was too young, buying me popcorn and promising not to tell Mom, and a Starbucks on every other corner, corporate sameness replacing the local businesses I remembered. I drove past my old high school, its brick facade exactly the same, and felt a wave of nausea remembering the pitying looks from teachers, the whispers from classmates, the way people had treated me like I was fragile and might shatter at any moment. I drove past the park where Iris used to push me on the swings, going higher and higher until I screamed with delight and terror, her laughter mixing with mine. Past the library where we'd spent countless Saturday afternoons, Iris helping me with book reports while she researched God knows what in those final weeks. Each landmark was a ghost, a reminder of the life we'd had before Halloween 2004, split our family's timeline into before and after, before happiness and after endless grief. I parked 3 blocks away from Maple Street, not wanting to draw attention to my car near the Hartley house, and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. The neighborhood was already decorated for Halloween, inflatable ghosts bobbing in front yards, fake cobwebs stretched across porches, carved pumpkins grinning from every step with their triangle eyes and jagged smiles. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere nearby, high and pure and innocent, and I felt a pang of something like grief for the innocence I'd lost the night Iris disappeared. I'd been trick-or-treating with friends when it happened, dressed as a witch in a costume Iris had helped me make, my pillowcase half full of candy, and my biggest worry whether the Johnsons would give out full-size candy bars again this year. I'd come home to find police cars in our driveway, their lights painting our house in red and blue. And my mother collapsed on the front lawn, screaming my sister's name into the darkness while neighbors stood in their doorways, watching our family fall apart. I'd never celebrated Halloween again after that night, never carved another pumpkin or worn another costume, the holiday forever tainted by the memory of the worst night of my life. As I walked toward Maple Street, my hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets to hide their trembling, I noticed people staring at me from their windows, curtains twitching as I passed. I realized with a start that some of them probably recognized me. The Chen family had been infamous here for years, our tragedy the subject of gossip and speculation, our pain entertainment for people with boring lives. I wondered what they thought, seeing me back after all this time, walking purposefully toward the one house in Millbrook that everyone avoided, the house that had become a local legend, a dare for stupid teenagers and a cautionary tale for children. Did they think I was crazy? Did they know something I didn't? Did they whisper to each other about the Chen girl coming back? about history repeating itself, about how some families were just cursed. The thought made my skin crawl, but I kept walking, my hand wrapped around the pepper spray in my jacket pocket, my other hand touching the brass key under my shirt like a prayer. 1428. Maple Street looked exactly as I remembered it from the one time Iris had driven us past it when I was 8, and somehow worse, as if the house had been rotting from the inside out for the past 30 years. The 2-story colonial had been beautiful once, with its blue shutters and wraparound porch, the kind of house where happy families were supposed to live, where children were supposed to grow up safe and loved. But 20 years of abandonment had turned it into something from a nightmare, a monument to tragedy and unanswered questions. The paint was peeling in long strips, revealing rotted wood underneath that looked diseased, almost organic. The windows were dark and empty, several of them broken, and I could have sworn I saw movement behind one of them, a shadow that disappeared when I looked directly at it. The yard was an overgrown jungle of weeds and dead bushes, and a rusted swing set in the back creaked in the wind, its chains making a sound like crying. A no trespassing sign hung crookedly on the front gate, and yellow police tape from some long-ago investigation still clung to the porch railing, faded and torn, a reminder that the law had tried and failed to solve this mystery. I stood across the street, staring at the house in the afternoon light, trying to imagine what could possibly happen here at midnight that would explain 20 years of disappearances, 20 years of grief. The rational part of my brain insisted this was insane, that I should turn around and go straight to the police, that whatever was in that house had taken my sister and would take me too if I gave it the chance. But I'd already come this far, and besides, I had hours before midnight. I needed to understand what I was walking into. I needed to know if Iris had been here, if she'd stood where I was standing now, looking at this house and seeing something I couldn't yet see, understanding something I was still too blind to grasp. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I thought might have answers, Detective Raymond Walsh, who'd been assigned to Iris's case and had stayed in touch with my parents for years afterward, even after the investigation officially went cold, even when his superiors told him to move on to cases that might actually be solved. He'd been at Iris's memorial service, standing in the back, and I'd seen him crying. This tough cop crying for a girl he'd never been able to save. He answered on the third ring, his voice gruff and tired, the voice of a man who'd seen too much and slept too little. Violet Chen. I wondered if I'd hear from you today. The statement caught me off guard, made my heart skip a beat. You knew I'd call. It's Halloween, and you're 30 years old now, the same age your sister was supposed to be if she'd lived, if she'd gotten to grow up and have a career and maybe a family. People do unpredictable things on anniversaries, especially milestone ones, and I've been thinking about Iris a lot lately, thinking about all the things I should have done differently, all the leads I should have followed harder. He paused, and I heard him sigh, a sound full of old regrets. You're in Millbrook, aren't you? Near the Hartley house. I didn't bother asking how he knew. Walsh had always been perceptive, one of the few cops who'd treated Iris's disappearance as more than just another runaway teenager case, who'd believed from the beginning that something terrible had happened to her. I got an invitation, I said, and then I told him everything. The envelope under my door, the handwriting that was unmistakably Iris's, the blog post about the pattern of disappearances, the comment that mentioned my name specifically. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, the silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Detective Walsh, I'm here. I'm just processing. Violet, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to tell you could cost me my pension, could end my career if anyone finds out I'm sharing classified information with a civilian, but I think you deserve to know the truth. And I think Iris would want you to know. Another pause. Longer this time, and I could hear him moving, a door closing, as if he was making sure no one could overhear. There's a file on the Hartley case, a file that was sealed by order of someone very high up in the state government, someone with enough power to make evidence disappear and witnesses go silent. I only know about it because I went digging after your sister disappeared and I noticed the same pattern you just described. Every 10 years. Like clockwork. Going back decades. I tried to investigate. Tried to connect the cases. Tried to get access to that sealed file. And I was told in no uncertain terms to drop it. Told that if I valued my career and my family's safety, I would forget I'd ever noticed the pattern. They transferred me to a different department. Buried me in paperwork for 6 months until I got the message. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own voice. Could barely form words past the fear and anger rising in my throat. Why? What's in the file? What are they hiding? I don't know exactly. I never got to see it. But I can tell you this. 2 days before your sister disappeared, she came to the station asking to see everything we had on the Hartley case. I wasn't there that day. I was following up on a lead in another case. But Officer Morrison, he's retired now, living in Florida. He told me she seemed excited, almost manic, like she'd figured something out and just needed confirmation. He gave her access to the public records, and she spent 3 hours going through old reports and photographs, taking notes in that journal she always carried. When she left, she took copies of several documents with her, and Morrison said she looked scared but determined, like she was about to do something dangerous but necessary. The world seemed to tilt sideways, and I had to lean against a tree to keep from falling, my vision blurring with tears. What documents? What did she find? Morrison couldn't remember exactly. It was 20 years ago, and he didn't think it was important at the time. But he said she was particularly interested in the layout of the Hartley house, in the architectural plans that were filed when it was built, and in something about the property's history, about who owned it before the Hartleys. The house was built in 1894, Violet, by a man named Elijah Hartley. Yes, same last name. Thomas Hartley's great-great-grandfather. It's been standing for 130 years, and according to county records that I accessed through some creative interpretation of public information laws, there have been 11 documented disappearances associated with that address since 1904, all of them in years, ending in 4-da, all of them on or around Halloween. 11 incidents, 37 people total. Just gone. No bodies, no evidence, no explanations, just families and individuals erased from existence. 11 incidents, 37 people. The numbers hit me like a physical blow, made me gasp for air. This wasn't just about Iris or the Hartleys. This was something much bigger, much older, and much more deliberate than I'd imagined. This was a pattern spanning more than a century, a cycle of horror that had been repeating itself while the world went on, oblivious or deliberately blind. I have to go inside, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, steadier than I had any right to feel given what I was proposing. I have to see what's in there. I have to understand what Iris found, what she was trying to do. Violet, no. Whatever's happening, it's dangerous. People with power have worked very hard to keep this quiet, and that means they'll do whatever it takes to maintain that silence. Let me make some calls. Get a team together. Do this properly with backup and... There's no time, I interrupted, looking at the house across the street, at the broken windows that seemed to watch me like eyes. The invitation says midnight tonight. If I don't show up, I might never get another chance to find out what happened to Iris. And Detective Walsh, I think she's still in there. I think she's been in there for 20 years. And she needs me. Walsh was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with resignation and something that sounded like pride. You're going no matter what I say, aren't you? You're just like her, too brave for your own good, too determined to let injustice stand. Yes. Then at least let me help. I'm 2 hours away, but I can be there by 8. We'll go in together before midnight, scope it out, see what we're dealing with. And Violet, bring a weapon, something more than pepper spray. Whatever's in that house, whatever's been taking people for 130 years, it's not going to be stopped by good intentions. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing on the sidewalk across from 1428 Maple Street, watching shadows move behind the broken windows. even though the house was supposed to be empty, even though no one had lived there for 30 years. I told myself it was just trees swaying in the wind, their branches casting shapes through the glass, just my imagination running wild after a sleepless night and too much coffee. But I'd stopped believing in simple explanations the moment I'd seen Iris's handwriting on that invitation. The moment I'd realized that the impossible might be possible after all. I had 6 hours until Walsh arrived, and another 4 hours after that until midnight. 6 hours to prepare myself for whatever waited inside that house. 6 hours to decide if I was brave enough, or crazy enough, to see this through. 6 hours to make peace with the possibility that I might not come back, that I might become the next name on the list of people who'd vanished into whatever darkness lived at 1428 Maple Street. I looked down at the brass key hanging around my neck, catching the afternoon light, warm against my skin, and wondered what door it would open, what secrets it would unlock. Then I turned and walked back to my car, already making a mental list of everything I'd need for tonight. Flashlights and extra batteries, my phone fully charged, the knife from my kitchen, and maybe, just maybe, the courage to finally learn the truth about what happened to my sister on Halloween night 20 years ago. To finally understand why she'd left me behind and never come home. I spent the next few hours at a coffee shop on Main Street. My laptop open to dozens of tabs about the Hartley house, the disappearances, and anything else I could find about 1428 Maple Street and the family that had built it. The barista, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20 with purple hair and multiple piercings, kept glancing at me nervously. Probably because I'd been nursing the same latte for 3 hours and muttering to myself while taking frantic notes, my eyes red from lack of sleep and crying. I didn't care what I looked like or what he thought. I was too deep into the research, too close to something that felt like understanding, to worry about looking crazy. What I found made my blood run cold and my hands shake so badly I had to set down my coffee to avoid spilling it. The house had been built by a man named Elijah Hartley in 1894. Yes, the same last name as the family that disappeared in 1994, which couldn't possibly be a coincidence. Elijah had been a wealthy industrialist who'd made his fortune in railroads and steel during the Gilded Age, one of those robber barons who'd built empires on the backs of workers who died in their factories and mines. According to a historical society article I found buried in a digital archive, he'd been obsessed with spiritualism and the occult, common interests among the wealthy elite of that era, who'd turned to seances and mediums after losing loved ones in the Civil War. But Elijah's interest had gone deeper than parlor tricks and table rapping. He'd traveled to Egypt and India, studying with mystics and collecting ancient texts, spending a fortune on what his contemporaries dismissed as superstitious nonsense. He'd built the house according to specific geometric principles, with rooms arranged in patterns that supposedly aligned with ley lines and celestial events, with windows positioned to capture light at precise moments of the year. The article mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Elijah's wife and 3 children had disappeared in October 1904, exactly 10 years after the house was completed, vanishing during a dinner party attended by some of Chicago's most prominent citizens. The guests reported that the family had excused themselves to check on a strange noise in the basement and simply never returned. A search of the house found nothing, but Elijah himself had been found dead in the basement 3 days later, his body positioned in the center of an elaborate chalk circle, surrounded by candles and symbols that no one could identify. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but the article hinted at rumors of something more sinister. Whispers of rituals and sacrifices that the respectable historical society couldn't quite bring itself to print. References to a diary that had been seized by authorities and never seen again. I cross-referenced the dates of all 11 disappearances Walsh had mentioned, pulling up old newspaper articles and police reports, and a pattern emerged that made my hands shake so badly I had to stop typing. Every disappearance happened in a year, ending in 1904, 1914, 1924, 1934, 1944, 1954, 1964, 1974, 1984, 1994, 2004. 11 incidents across 100 years, each one exactly 10 years apart, each one occurring during the last week of October, most of them on Halloween itself. The number of victims varied, sometimes one person, sometimes entire families. But when I added them all up, the total was exactly 37 people. 37 lives erased from existence, leaving behind nothing but questions and grief and families destroyed by loss. I found myself thinking about numerology, about the significance of certain numbers in occult practices, remembering a college course on comparative religion I'd taken. 37 was a prime number, considered powerful in certain traditions. 11 was a master number, associated with spiritual awakening and intuition. Was someone trying to complete a cycle? Was there a specific number of victims needed for some kind of ritual? The thought was insane, but then again, so was everything else about this situation. So was the idea that my sister's handwriting could appear on an invitation 20 years after she'd vanished. I dug deeper into Elijah Hartley's background, using genealogy websites and historical databases, and discovered something that made my stomach drop and my coffee turn to acid in my mouth. He'd been a member of a secret society called the Order of the Eternal Return, a group that believed in cyclical time and the possibility of breaking free from linear existence through specific rituals performed at moments of cosmic alignment. The order had been disbanded in 1905 after several members were arrested for grave robbing and suspected murder. Their beliefs documented by a scandalized press that had treated them as dangerous lunatics. They thought that by sacrificing souls at precise intervals, they could create a doorway to a realm outside of time itself, a place where death had no meaning and consciousness could exist eternally. Most of the members had been committed to asylums or fled the country, but their writings had survived, and I found excerpts that made my skin crawl. The door must be fed every 10 years, on the night when the veil is thinnest, with souls freely given or freely taken. 37 souls to open the door, 37 souls to hold it open, and one final soul to step through and claim eternity. At 7:30 p.m., as the sun was setting and trick-or-treaters were beginning to emerge from their houses in costumes and excitement, my phone buzzed with a text from Walsh. 30 minutes out. Meet me at the corner of Maple and Oak. Don't go near the house until I get there. I mean it. Violet, wait for me. I packed up my laptop, left a generous tip for the patient barista who looked relieved to see me go, and drove to the meeting spot, my heart pounding harder with each passing minute. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if I wasn't so terrified, if I didn't know what this night might bring. Halloween night was in full swing now, with children in costumes running from house to house, their parents trailing behind with flashlights and phones, their laughter and excitement a stark contrast to the dread that sat heavy in my chest. I watched a little girl dressed as a princess skip past my car, her tiara sparkling in the streetlights, her laughter pure and innocent, and I felt a fierce protectiveness toward her and all the other kids out tonight. Whatever was happening at 1428 Maple Street, whatever had been happening for 130 years, it needed to end tonight. No more disappearances. No more families destroyed. No more children growing up without their siblings, wondering what happened, carrying that weight for the rest of their lives. Walsh pulled up in an unmarked sedan at exactly 8:00 p.m., and I was struck by how much he'd aged since I'd last seen him 5 years ago at my parents' going-away party. His hair was completely gray now, almost white, and deep lines bracketed his mouth and eyes. The lines of a man who'd carried too many unsolved cases, too many failures. He'd been 45 when Iris disappeared. Now he was 65 and looked every day of it. Looked like a man who'd spent 20 years haunted by the girl he couldn't save. But his eyes were still sharp, still kind. And when he hugged me, I felt some of my terror ease. Felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone in this. "You look like hell," he said, which was probably true. I hadn't slept in over 30 hours, hadn't eaten since yesterday, and I'd been crying on and off all day. "You look like you've seen a ghost," I replied, and he laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor. "Maybe I have. Maybe we both have. Come on, let's talk in my car where it's warm and private." We sat in his sedan with the heater running, and he pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase, the kind of folder that spoke of years of investigation, of obsession. "I made some calls on the drive up here. called in favors from people who owe me, people who know how to access files that are supposed to be sealed, people who've been waiting 20 years for someone to finally ask the right questions. What I'm about to show you is technically classified, and we could both get in serious trouble for this. I could lose my pension. You could be charged with obstruction of justice. But I figure we're already past the point of playing by the rules. And besides, some things are more important than following orders. He opened the folder, and I saw crime scene photos from 1994, the night the Hartley family disappeared. Images that had never been released to the public. The photos showed a house frozen in time, a half-carved pumpkin on the kitchen table, the knife still embedded in it, a pot of candy corn on the stove with the burner still on, 3 place settings at the dining room table with food still on the plates, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, a normal family dinner interrupted by something inexplicable. But it was the photo of the basement that made me gasp, made me grab Walsh's arm without thinking. The walls were covered in symbols and equations, complex geometric patterns that looked like they'd been drawn by someone with advanced mathematical knowledge, someone desperate and terrified. In the center of the floor was a circle made of what the report identified as salt mixed with ash, and within that circle were 3 smaller circles, each containing a personal item, a man's watch, a woman's wedding ring, and a child's soccer cleat, each one placed with obvious care and intention. "They knew," Walsh said quietly, his voice heavy with old sorrow. Thomas Hartley knew what was going to happen. He'd been researching his family history. I found his library card records, found the books he'd checked out in the months before they disappeared. He discovered the connection to Elijah Hartley, discovered that he was a direct descendant, that the house had been passed down through the family for generations, even though no one had lived in it for long. He found documents suggesting that the disappearances were part of a ritual that Elijah had started, a ritual that required a blood sacrifice from his own line every 10 years to maintain something. Thomas tried to stop it. He drew protective symbols, created a barrier, tried to shield his family. But obviously it didn't work. Whatever's in that house, whatever Elijah opened, it's stronger than salt circles and good intentions. I stared at the photos, my mind racing, trying to process what this meant. What about Iris? Did she know about this? Did she know what Thomas tried to do? Walsh pulled out another set of documents, and my breath caught when I saw my sister's handwriting on photocopied pages, her distinctive loops and flourishes, her handwriting that I'd know anywhere. These are the notes she made when she was researching the Hartley case. Notes that Morrison kept in his personal files because he thought they might be important someday. She'd figured out most of it. Violet. She knew about the pattern, about Elijah, about the ritual and the order of the eternal return. And she thought she'd found a way to stop it. Thought she'd found something that Thomas Hartley had missed. He handed me a page where Iris had written in her distinctive script, and I had to blink back tears to read it. The key is in the house. Elijah built a failsafe, a way to break the cycle. He wasn't completely insane. He knew what he'd done was wrong, knew he'd opened something that shouldn't be opened. It's hidden in the place where it all began, the basement, the key he wore around his neck, the key mentioned in the Historical Society records. If I can find it before Halloween 2004, I can end this. I can save the next family. But I have to go alone. The ritual requires willing participants, people who enter the house of their own free choice on Halloween night. If I go in knowing what I'm doing, knowing the risk, maybe I can disrupt it. Maybe I can be the last one. Maybe I can close the door that Elijah opened. I'm scared, but I have to try. I can't let another family go through what the Hartleys went through. I can't let another little girl lose her sister. Tears blurred my vision as I read my sister's words, understanding for the first time what she'd done, understanding the choice she'd made. She hadn't been taken. She'd gone willingly, sacrificing herself in an attempt to break a cycle of horror that had been going on for a century. She'd been 17 years old, brave and brilliant, and so determined to save others that she'd walked into that house knowing she might never come out, knowing she was leaving me behind, knowing our parents would be destroyed by her loss. She'd done it anyway because she thought it was right, because she couldn't live with herself if she didn't at least try. She was a hero, Walsh said softly, his voice thick with emotion. She went in there trying to stop this, trying to save people she'd never met, and maybe she succeeded. There haven't been any disappearances since 2004. No one vanished in 2014. The cycle might already be broken, Violet. Your sister might have actually done it. Then why the invitation? I asked, my voice cracking, my hands shaking as I held the page with Iris's handwriting. Why bring me here now, 20 years later? Why does the blog comment say I'm the key to ending this if it's already over? Walsh's expression darkened, and I saw fear in his eyes for the first time. Real fear that made my stomach clench. That's what worries me. Either someone wants to restart the ritual, wants to open that door again for their own purposes, or... He hesitated, and I saw him struggling with whether to voice what we were both thinking. Or what? Say it. Or your sister is still in there, somehow. Still alive. Still trapped in whatever space exists between our world and whatever's on the other side of that door. And she needs you to finish what she started. Needs you to lock the door permanently so she can finally rest. Or... He paused again, and this time his voice dropped to almost a whisper. Or, she needs you to take her place. The possibility hit me like a lightning bolt, like ice water in my veins. For 20 years, I'd assumed Iris was dead, had mourned her and tried to move on, had built a life around the hole her absence had left. But what if she'd been trapped in that house all this time? Caught in whatever supernatural mechanism Elijah Hartley had created, suspended between life and death, between our world and whatever lay beyond? What if the invitation in her handwriting wasn't a forgery or a cruel trick, but an actual message from my sister, reaching out across 2 decades of silence, begging me to come, to help her, to free her, or join her, or finish what she'd started? I looked at Walsh, and he must have seen the determination in my eyes because he nodded slowly, his jaw set. We're going in, aren't we? We're going in, I confirmed, my voice steady now, my decision made. But not at midnight. We go now, while we still have time to prepare, time to understand what we're dealing with. If this is a trap, I want to see it coming. If Iris is in there, I want time to figure out how to help her. And if someone's trying to restart this nightmare, I want to stop them before they get the chance. We gathered our supplies from Walsh's trunk, flashlights with extra batteries, his service weapon and a backup, my pepper spray and knife, a bag of salt that Walsh had brought, just in case, and a small video camera to document whatever we found. As we walked toward 1428 Maple Street, the last trick-or-treaters were heading home, called in by parents who didn't want their children out too late, and the neighborhood was settling into an uneasy quiet. The house loomed before us, dark and menacing, its broken windows like empty eye sockets, its sagging porch like a mouth ready to swallow us whole. I felt the brass key around my neck grow warm against my skin, almost hot, as if it recognized where we were, as if it was responding to the proximity of whatever it was meant to unlock. Whatever waited inside, whatever truth or horror or impossible miracle, I was finally going to face it. For Iris. For all the victims who'd disappeared into this house over 130 years. And for myself, because I was done being haunted by questions, done being the traumatized little girl who'd lost her sister. Tonight, I would have answers, even if they destroyed me. Tonight, I would either save my sister or join her. But either way, this cycle of horror would end. The front door of 1428 Maple Street was locked, but the wood around the frame was so rotted that Walsh was able to force it open with one solid kick, the sound echoing through the empty house like a gunshot, like a warning. We both froze, listening for any response, any sign that we weren't alone, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. Nothing. Just the creak of old wood settling and the whisper of wind through broken windows and something else. Something underneath. a sound like breathing, slow and deliberate, as if the house itself was alive and aware of our presence. Walsh went in first, his flashlight in one hand and his weapon in the other. Moving with the careful precision of someone who'd cleared hundreds of dangerous buildings in his career, I followed close behind, my own flashlight trembling in my grip, my other hand clutching the knife from my kitchen, the blade suddenly seeming inadequate against whatever we might face. The smell hit me immediately. Not the musty odor of abandonment I'd expected, not the smell of mold and decay, but something else that made my heart stop and my breath catch. Lavender. The same scent that had clung to Iris's hoodie for years after she disappeared. The same shampoo she'd used religiously. The same smell that I associated with safety and love and everything I'd lost. "Do you smell that?" I whispered. And Walsh nodded, his jaw tight, his weapon raised. "Yeah, and that's not possible. That smell should have faded decades ago. Unless..." He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he was thinking. Unless Iris had been here recently, unless she was still here somehow. The interior of the house was a time capsule of horror, a museum of interrupted lives. The furniture from 1994 was still in place, covered in dust and cobwebs but otherwise untouched, a floral couch that had probably been Patricia Hartley's pride, a coffee table with magazines still fanned out on top, their covers showing Bill Clinton and O.J. Simpson and other relics of that era. Children's drawings hung on the refrigerator, their colors faded but still visible. Stick figures of a family holding hands, a house with a smiling sun, the innocent art of a child who'd had no idea what was coming. A calendar on the wall was turned to October 1994, with Halloween circled in red marker and trick-or-treaters 6 p.m. written in neat handwriting. But there were other things too. Things that didn't belong to the Hartley family. Things that made my blood run cold. A backpack in the corner that I recognized instantly. Iris's backpack. The purple JanSport she'd been carrying the night she disappeared, still looking almost new despite 20 years. A pair of sneakers by the door that were definitely from the 2000s, not the 90s. Converse high tops in the style Iris had loved. And on the coffee table, arranged in a careful circle like some kind of shrine, were photographs of all 11 disappearance incidents, including one of Iris that had been taken from our house, a photo that had sat on our mantel until my parents couldn't bear to look at it anymore. "Someone's been here," Walsh said, his voice low and tense, his weapon sweeping the room. "Recently. These photos aren't 20 years old. Look at the paper. It's still white, not yellowed. Someone's been maintaining this. Whatever this is, someone's been keeping the house like this deliberately." We moved through the house slowly, checking each room, our flashlights revealing more impossible things. The living room, the kitchen, the dining room, all frozen in time, all showing signs of the Hartley family's interrupted life, but also showing signs of other victims, other lives cut short. A man's jacket from the 1970s hanging on a coat rack. A woman's purse from the 1980s sitting on a chair. A child's toy from the 1960s on the floor. It was as if the house was collecting trophies, keeping mementos of everyone it had taken, building a monument to its own hunger. But as we climbed the stairs to the second floor, I noticed something strange that made my skin crawl. The dust on the steps had been disturbed, and there were footprints, small footprints, like a woman's, leading up and then back down, over and over, as if someone had been pacing this route for years, wearing a path in the dust, unable to leave, but unable to stop moving. The footprints were fresh. Some of them couldn't have been more than a few days old. "Iris," I whispered, my voice breaking. "She's been here. She's been walking these stairs. Walsh, she's alive. She's been alive this whole time." Walsh put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but gentle. "We don't know that for sure. Don't get your hopes up until we know what we're dealing with. Whatever's in this house, it's not bound by normal rules. Those footprints could be echoes, imprints of past events. We need to stay focused." But I couldn't stay focused. I was already moving faster, climbing the stairs 2 at a time, following those footprints, following the smell of lavender that was getting stronger with each step. The bedrooms were heartbreaking in their normalcy. Lily Hartley's room was still decorated with soccer posters and stuffed animals, a child's life preserved like an insect in amber. The parents' room had clothes laid out on the bed, as if Patricia had been deciding what to wear to hand out candy. But it was the third bedroom, a small office, that made me stop cold, that made me grab the doorframe to keep from falling. The walls were covered in the same symbols and equations we'd seen in the crime scene photos of the basement, but these were different, more refined, more complex, layered over each other as if someone had been working on them for years, refining them, perfecting them. And in the center of the room, on a desk, was a journal. I recognized it before I even opened it, recognized the worn leather cover and the way the pages were dog-eared from constant use. Iris's journal, the one she'd been writing in constantly those last few weeks. My hand shook as I flipped through the pages, seeing entries dated from October 2004, just days before she disappeared, her handwriting growing more frantic and excited as the days progressed. October 25th, 2004. I figured it out. Elijah Hartley didn't create a ritual to escape time. He created a prison. He opened a door to something he couldn't control, something hungry and ancient. And when he realized what he'd done, he tried to contain it. But the containment requires energy, requires souls to feed it, to keep the door from opening completely. Every 10 years, the house takes souls to satisfy the hunger, to keep whatever's on the other side from breaking through. The disappearances aren't sacrifices to open a door. They're sacrifices to keep it closed. But there's a way to stop it. The key, the literal key that Elijah wore around his neck, can lock the door permanently. I found references to it in his personal papers at the Historical Society, found a letter he wrote to his brother before he died. If I can find that key and use it in the basement at the moment of the ritual, at midnight on Halloween, I can seal the door forever. No more disappearances, no more families destroyed. I just have to be brave enough to try. The brass key around my neck suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, felt like it was burning into my skin. I pulled it out, staring at it in the beam of my flashlight, and Walsh's eyes went wide with recognition and horror. "That's it," he breathed. "That's the key she was looking for. Where did you get it?" It was in her things. She was wearing it the night she disappeared. She found it, Walsh. She had the key, and she went into the basement to end this. But something went wrong. She got trapped, just like all the others, or... I flipped forward in the journal, looking for later entries, and found one dated October 31st, 2004, written in handwriting that was shaky and scared. "It's almost midnight. I'm in the basement. I found the door. God, it's real. It's all real. And it's so much worse than I imagined. The door isn't wood or metal. It's something else. Something that hurts to look at. Something that shouldn't exist in our reality. I can hear things on the other side. Voices calling to me. Promising me things. Threatening me. The key is in my hand. But I realize now that I made a mistake. The door can't be locked from this side. Someone has to go through, has to stand on the other side and lock it from there, trapping themselves forever to save everyone else. I'm so scared. I don't want to die. I don't want to leave Mom and Dad and Violet, but I can't let this continue. I can't let another family be destroyed. If you're reading this, if someone finds this journal, please tell my family that I love them. Tell Violet that I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye, that I'm sorry I have to leave her. Tell her to be brave, to live a full life, to be happy. And tell her that if there's ever a way to finish this, to truly end it, she's the only one I trust to do it. She's stronger than she knows. The key will find its way to her, and when the time comes, she'll know what to do. The journal entry ended there. The last words my sister had ever written, and I was crying so hard I could barely breathe, could barely stand. Walsh grabbed me, held me up, his own eyes wet with tears. "She went through," I managed to say. "She locked the door from the other side. She's been there for 20 years, trapped in whatever hell exists beyond that door, holding it closed so no one else would be taken. And now she needs me to finish it, to lock it permanently so she can finally rest." Walsh pulled me back gently, his voice urgent. "Violet, listen to me. We don't know that's what she wants. We don't know what's really down there. This could be a trap, something designed to lure you in, to get you to open the door instead of locking it. We need to think this through. We need—" But I wasn't listening anymore. I was already moving, already heading for the stairs, the journal clutched in one hand and the key burning against my chest. I could feel it now, could feel something pulling me toward the basement, toward whatever waited below. It felt like Iris, felt like my sister calling to me across an impossible distance, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. Walsh followed, cursing under his breath, his weapon drawn, and together we made our way back downstairs, back to the kitchen, to the basement door. It was exactly where the crime scene photos had shown it. A heavy wooden door with iron hinges that looked original to the house, that looked like it had been standing there for 130 years waiting for this moment. Unlike everything else, this door showed no signs of age or decay. It looked as solid and new as the day it had been installed, as if time couldn't touch it, as if it existed slightly outside of normal reality. The doorknob was ice cold when I touched it, so cold it burned. And for a moment, I could have sworn I heard voices on the other side, whispers in a language I didn't recognize. And underneath them, a woman's voice calling my name, a voice I'd know anywhere even after 20 years. "Violet. Violet, please. It's been so long. I'm so tired. Please help me. Iris!" I pressed my ear against the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. "Iris, is that you? I'm here. I came. I'm going to help you." Walsh pulled me back gently but firmly, his face pale, his weapon raised toward the door. "We don't know what's down there. We go in prepared, we stay together, and if things go sideways, we run. Understood?" I nodded, though we both knew that running might not be an option once we crossed that threshold, once we descended into whatever waited below. Walsh tried the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. Locked. I looked down at the brass key in my hand, and with a certainty that felt like destiny, like fate, I knew it would fit. I inserted the key into the lock, and it slid in perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this moment for 120 years, as if everything that had happened, all the disappearances, all the grief, all the years of waiting, had been leading to this. The lock clicked, and the door swung open on silent hinges, revealing a staircase descending into absolute darkness, a darkness so complete that our flashlights seemed to be swallowed by it, their beams penetrating only a few feet before being absorbed. The smell of lavender intensified, mixed now with something else. Ozone, like the air before a lightning strike. And underneath that, the copper tang of blood and something worse, something organic and wrong that made my stomach turn. "A last chance to call for backup," Walsh said, but his hand was already on his weapon, his flashlight pointed down the stairs, his body tense and ready. "No time," I replied, thinking of the invitation, of midnight approaching, of Iris trapped somewhere in the darkness below. "We go now, or we might lose our chance forever. She's been waiting 20 years. I won't make her wait any longer." We descended into the basement of 1428 Maple Street, and with each step, I felt the temperature drop and the air grow thicker, harder to breathe, as if we were moving underwater, or through some medium denser than air. The walls were covered in the same symbols we'd seen upstairs, but these were glowing faintly with a sickly green light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, that seemed to respond to our presence. And at the bottom of the stairs, in the center of a vast basement that seemed impossibly larger than the house above, larger than should be physically possible, I saw something that made my mind rebel against reality itself. that made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. A door. Not a door in a wall, but a door standing alone in the middle of the room. A massive thing made of black wood, or something that looked like wood but felt wrong, felt like it was made of solidified darkness, and iron, covered in chains and locks that glowed with the same green light as the symbols. The door was vibrating, shaking in its frame, and I could hear things on the other side, screaming and laughing and crying all mixed together. Voices in languages that had never been human, sounds that made my ears hurt and my vision blur. And standing in front of it, her hands pressed against the black surface, her whole body straining to hold it closed, looking exactly as she had 20 years ago, except for the exhaustion in her eyes and the way her form seemed to flicker and fade at the edges, was my sister Iris. She turned to face us, and I saw tears streaming down her face, saw relief and love and desperate hope in her eyes. "Violet," she said, her voice breaking, her voice exactly as I remembered it. "You came. I've been waiting so long. I've been holding the door closed for 20 years, but I'm so tired. I can't hold it much longer. You have to help me. You have to use the key to lock it permanently, before midnight, before it opens again and takes everything. Not just people this time. If it opens fully, it will consume the entire town, maybe more. Please. You're the only one who can end this." I started toward her, tears streaming down my face, 20 years of grief and longing overwhelming me. But Walsh grabbed my arm, his grip painful, his voice urgent. "Wait. Something's not right. She hasn't aged a day. Time doesn't work like that, even in supernatural situations. This could be a trick, an illusion designed to get you to open the door instead of locking it." Iris smiled sadly, and in that smile I saw my sister, saw the girl who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework, and promised to always protect me. "Time doesn't work the same way here, Detective Walsh. I've been trapped between moments, between your world and what's beyond, holding back something that wants to devour everything. I've been suspended, unchanging, for 20 years. But the ritual is almost complete. At midnight, on the 20th anniversary of when I entered this house, the door will either be sealed forever, or it will open wide enough to consume not just individuals, but reality itself. Elijah Hartley was a fool who thought he could control forces beyond human comprehension. I've spent 20 years learning the truth. The only way to stop this is to lock the door from both sides simultaneously. Someone has to stay here, in this space between, to make sure it never opens again. And someone has to lock it from your side, using the key at the exact moment of midnight. The implications of her words hit me like a physical blow, like a knife to the heart. No, there has to be another way. I just found you again. I can't lose you." "You never lost me," Iris said gently, her voice full of love and sorrow. "I've been here, watching over you, sending you dreams to keep you safe, guiding you to this moment. I've seen you grow up, seen you become strong and brave and everything I knew you would be. Because you're the only one who can finish this, Violet. You're the only one I trust with the key, lock the door, save everyone, and know that I chose this. I chose to be the guardian, the last sacrifice, so that no one else would have to disappear into this darkness. I chose to save you, to save our parents, to save everyone who comes after. This is my choice, and I'm at peace with it." The clock was ticking toward midnight, and I had a choice to make that would define the rest of my life. A choice between saving my sister and saving everyone else. A choice that no one should ever have to make, but that I knew, deep down, I'd already made the moment I'd seen that invitation. Because Iris was right. She'd always been right. Some things were more important than our own happiness, than our own desires. Some things were worth any sacrifice. And I would honor my sister's choice, even if it broke my heart, even if it meant losing her all over again. I looked at the key in my hand, at the door shaking in its frame, at my sister holding back the darkness, and I knew what I had to do. I stood in that impossible basement, the brass key burning in my hand like a brand, and looked at my sister's face for the first time in 20 years, memorizing every detail, the curve of her smile, the determination in her eyes, the way she stood with her shoulders back, even though I could see how exhausted she was, how much this was costing her. Every instinct screamed at me to grab her, to pull her away from that terrible door and run, to find some other solution that didn't require losing her again, that didn't require me to make the same impossible choice she'd made 20 years ago. But I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, could see the way her form flickered and faded at the edges like a candle flame in the wind. And I understood that she'd been a prisoner here far longer than I'd been grieving her absence, that she'd been fighting this battle alone while I'd been living my life, oblivious to her sacrifice. "Tell me exactly what I need to do," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, steadier than I had any right to feel. Walsh moved closer, his weapon still drawn, his eyes scanning the basement for threats, for some enemy he could shoot, some problem he could solve with bullets and determination. But this wasn't that kind of problem. This was something older and darker than anything in his experience, something that couldn't be fought with conventional weapons. The symbols on the walls were glowing brighter now, pulsing faster, and I could feel something building in the air, some kind of pressure or tension that made my ears pop and my teeth ache. The door was shaking harder, the chains rattling, and I could hear the things on the other side throwing themselves against it with increasing desperation, as if they knew their time was running out, as if they knew that their chance to break through was slipping away. Iris gestured to the door, and I saw that among the chains and locks, there was one keyhole that stood out, positioned exactly at heart level, glowing with the same sickly green light as the symbols, but brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. When the clock strikes midnight, the door will try to open. It happens every 10 years. But this year is special. It's been 20 years since I entered, and 20 is a number of completion in the ritual Elijah started. If the door opens tonight, it won't just take a few people. It will tear a hole in reality itself, and everything within a 100-mile radius will be pulled into the space between moments, trapped forever like I've been, feeding the hunger that lives beyond. Millions of people, Violet, Chicago, the suburbs, all of it, gone. I felt my blood run cold, felt the weight of what she was saying settle on my shoulders like a physical burden. But if I lock it?" I asked, already knowing the answer would break my heart. "If you lock it at the exact moment of midnight, using the key that Elijah himself wore, the door will be sealed permanently. The ritual will be broken, the cycle will end, and no one else will ever disappear." "But," she hesitated, and I saw fresh tears on her cheeks, saw the pain in her eyes. "But I have to stay on this side. Someone needs to be here, holding the seal in place, making sure it never weakens. It's the price for ending this. One willing soul, choosing to stand guard for eternity, so that others can live free. I made that choice 20 years ago, and I don't regret it. But I need you to make a choice too, to let me go, to lock this door knowing I'll be on the other side, to live your life without me but knowing that I'm here, protecting you and everyone else." "Then I'll stay," I said immediately, desperately, my voice breaking. "You've done your time. Let me take your place. Let me be the guardian. You deserve to live, to have the life you gave up." "It doesn't work that way," Iris interrupted gently but firmly. "The guardian has to be someone who entered the house knowing the truth, who chose to face the door with full understanding of the cost. You came here looking for answers, looking for me. I came here 20 years ago knowing I might never leave, knowing exactly what I was sacrificing and why. My choice was made then. Yours is different. Your choice is whether to honor my sacrifice by living fully, by being happy, by making my choice mean something, or to let grief consume you the way it consumed Mom and Dad." Walsh spoke up, his voice rough with emotion, with 20 years of guilt and regret. "There has to be another way. Some loophole, some trick we're missing. I've been a cop for 40 years, and there's always another way if you look hard enough. There isn't, Iris said, and I heard finality in her voice, heard acceptance. Believe me, detective, I've had 20 years to search for one. 20 years of standing here, holding this door, thinking through every possibility. This is the only way. And Violet, you need to decide now. It's 11:47. We have 13 minutes, and I need you to be ready. Need you to be strong enough to do what has to be done. I looked at the key in my hand, then at my sister, then at the door that was beginning to shake so violently that the chains were starting to crack, green light leaking through the gaps like toxic gas. I thought about all the people who'd disappeared over 130 years, all the families destroyed by this curse, all the children who'd grown up without their siblings or parents or friends. I thought about the little girl in the princess costume I'd seen earlier, about all the children in Millbrook and Chicago who deserved to grow up safe, who deserved to live their lives without this shadow hanging over them, without the fear that they might be next. And I thought about Iris at 17, brave enough to walk into this nightmare alone, to sacrifice her entire future so that others could have theirs, to make a choice that no teenager should ever have to make, but that she'd made anyway because it was right, because she couldn't live with herself if she didn't at least try. I need to know something first, I said, my voice trembling but determined. These 20 years, have you been in pain? Has it been torture? Have you been suffering this whole time? Iris considered the question carefully, and I saw her weighing her words, deciding how much truth I could handle. Not pain, exactly. More like loneliness and purpose. I've been holding back the darkness, and that's given me strength, given me something to fight for. I've been able to watch over you, to send you dreams and small protections when I could gather enough energy. I saw you graduate high school, even though I couldn't be there. I saw you go to college, get your first apartment, get your heart broken by that guy in your statistics class who didn't deserve you. I've been with you, even when you couldn't see me, even when you thought I was gone. And if you lock this door, I'll still be here, still watching, still loving you. You'll just know where I am now. You'll know I'm safe, in a way, and that I'm doing something that matters, something that saves lives every single day. You'll know that my sacrifice wasn't in vain. The door shook harder, and a sound came from behind it that made my bones vibrate and my vision blur. A howl that seemed to contain 1,000 voices, all screaming in hunger and rage and desperate need. Walsh raised his weapon, though we all knew bullets would be useless against whatever was trying to break through, against forces that existed outside the normal rules of physics and reality. 11:52, he said, his voice tight with tension. Violet, we're running out of time. Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it now. I stepped forward and hugged my sister, feeling her solid and real in my arms for the first time in 20 years, feeling her warmth and her heartbeat and the way she still smelled like lavender even after all this time. She hugged me back fiercely, desperately, and I felt her tears on my neck, felt her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for 2 decades. I love you, I whispered into her hair, my voice breaking. I never stopped loving you, and I never will. You're the bravest person I've ever known, and I'm so proud to be your sister. I'm so proud of what you did, of what you've been doing all these years, and I promise I'll live. I'll live for both of us. I'll be happy and brave and everything you wanted me to be. I'll make your sacrifice mean something. I know, she whispered back, her voice thick with tears. That's what kept me strong all these years. Your love, Mom and Dad's love, even when you thought I was gone. Love doesn't disappear, Violet. It just changes form. It transcends time and space and even death. And mine will always be with you, always protecting you, always cheering you on. You're going to do amazing things. You're going to help people, solve mysteries, bring closure to families like ours. You're going to fall in love with someone who deserves you, and you're going to be happy. And I'll be here, watching, so proud of you." We broke apart, and Iris positioned herself in front of the door, her hands pressed against the black wood, her whole body straining to hold it closed. The chains were glowing red now, heating up, and I could see them beginning to crack and splinter, could see green light leaking through in wider streams. The temperature in the basement had dropped so low that I could see my breath, could see frost forming on the walls. And the pressure in the air was so intense that my ears were ringing and my head was pounding. "Now, Violet! Do it now!" Iris screamed over the howling from beyond the door, over the sound of reality itself beginning to tear. I ran to the door, the key clutched in my fist so tightly that the edges cut into my palm, and thrust it into the keyhole. The moment it made contact, the entire basement exploded with light. Not the sickly green glow, but a pure white radiance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, that seemed to burn away the darkness and the corruption and the hunger that had lived here for 130 years. I heard Walsh shout something behind me, but his voice was drowned out by a sound like thunder and breaking glass, and 1,000 locks clicking shut all at once, like the universe itself was sealing this door, was saying, "Enough, no more, this ends now." The key turned in my hand, moving on its own, and I felt power surge through me, the accumulated energy of 130 years of trapped souls, all of them crying out in relief as the door finally, permanently, sealed. I felt their gratitude and their pain and their joy at finally being released, at finally being able to rest. The light was so bright I had to close my eyes, and when I opened them again, everything had changed. The basement was just a basement now, small, ordinary, with concrete walls and a water heater in the corner and boxes of old Christmas decorations. The symbols were gone. The black door was gone. The chains and the green light and the impossible geometry. All of it gone. As if it had never existed. As if it had been a nightmare that we'd finally woken up from. And Iris was fading, becoming translucent, her form dissolving into particles of light that rose up toward the ceiling like fireflies, like stars. No! I reached for her, but my hands passed through her like she was made of smoke, like she was already more ghost than person. "Iris, please, don't go. Stay with me." "It's okay," she said, her voice echoing as if from a great distance, as if she was already somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't follow. "I'm not gone. I'm just somewhere else. Somewhere I need to be. And I'm not alone anymore, Violet. All the others who were taken, they're here with me. And we're finally at peace. We're the guardians now, all of us together, making sure this never happens again, making sure no one else has to suffer what we suffered. We're protecting the world from the darkness, and it doesn't hurt anymore. It feels right. It feels like purpose." I was crying so hard I could barely see, could barely breathe, but I managed to choke out, "Will I ever see you again? Will I ever get to talk to you, to tell you about my life?" Iris smiled, and for a moment, she was solid again, real enough to touch my cheek with her hand, real enough that I could feel her warmth one last time. "Every Halloween, look for me in the sunset. I'll be there, in the orange and purple light, watching over you. And Violet, live. Live the life I couldn't have. Be happy, fall in love, have adventures, do all the things I would have done if I'd had the chance. And know that I'm cheering you on every step of the way. So proud of you, so grateful that you were my sister. You gave me 20 more years by coming here tonight, by finishing what I started. You freed me from having to hold the door alone. Now I have help. Now I have company. And now I can rest knowing that it's truly over. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to let me go." Then she was gone, dissolved completely into light that rose up through the ceiling and disappeared, leaving behind only the faint smell of lavender and the echo of her voice saying, "I love you." One last time. The key in my hand crumbled to dust, its purpose fulfilled, its power spent. Walsh and I stood in the empty basement. and I heard him let out a shaky breath, heard him holster his weapon with trembling hands. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "It's over," I confirmed, feeling the truth of it in my bones, feeling the absence of the pressure and the hunger and the wrongness that had permeated this place. The house was just a house now. The curse was broken. The cycle had ended. My sister was finally at peace. We climbed the stairs and walked out of 1428 Maple Street at exactly midnight, stepping onto the porch just as church bells began to chime across Millbrook, their sound clear and pure in the cold October air. The air felt different, lighter, cleaner, as if a weight that had been pressing down on the town for 130 years had finally lifted, as if the world itself was breathing easier. Walsh called it in, and within an hour, the house was swarming with police and investigators and forensic teams. They found evidence of all 11 disappearances, personal items that had been preserved in that space between moments, items that could finally be returned to families, that could finally provide closure. They found Iris's backpack with her journal inside, found Thomas Hartley's notes about the ritual, found artifacts dating back to 1904. They finally had answers for dozens of families who'd been waiting for decades, finally had explanations for mysteries that had haunted this town for generations. The house was demolished 3 weeks later, and a memorial park was built on the site, with 37 trees planted in honor of all the victims, one for each person who'd been taken over 130 years. A plaque was installed with all their names, including Iris Chen, who was finally, officially, laid to rest, her sacrifice recognized and honored. The plaque read, "In memory of those who were lost, and in gratitude to Iris Chen, who gave everything to ensure no one else would be taken. Her courage ended a cycle of darkness that had lasted 130 years. May she rest in peace, knowing she saved countless lives." I stayed in Millbrook for a month, helping Walsh with the investigation, talking to reporters who wanted to know the story, and finally, grieving properly for my sister, not grieving her loss, but celebrating her life, celebrating her courage and her sacrifice and everything she'd been. My parents flew in from Arizona, and we held a memorial service that was attended by hundreds of people, everyone who'd been touched by the disappearances, everyone who'd lived in fear of that house, everyone whose lives had been saved by Iris's choice. We cried together, and we healed together, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I could breathe. Like the weight I'd been carrying had finally been lifted. On my last night in Millbrook, I stood in the memorial park at sunset, watching the sky turn orange and purple, and I swear I saw her, just for a moment, a shimmer in the light that looked like Iris, smiling at me, whole and happy and at peace. I raised my hand in a wave, and the shimmer seemed to wave back before fading into the dusk, leaving me with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in 20 years. I drove back to Chicago the next morning, but I was different now. Lighter, free, whole in a way I hadn't been since I was 10 years old. I'd spent 20 years haunted by questions, and now I had answers. More than that, I had purpose. I quit my job as a data analyst and went back to school to study criminal justice and forensic psychology. I wanted to help other families find closure, to solve cold cases, and bring peace to people who'd lost loved ones to unexplained disappearances, to honor Iris's sacrifice by continuing her work in a different way. It's what she would have wanted. It's what she deserved. Every Halloween since then, I've returned to Millbrook to visit the memorial park. I bring flowers, lavender, always lavender, and I tell Iris about my year, about the cases I've solved and the families I've helped and the life I'm building. I tell her about the man I'm dating, a detective named Marcus who understands my past and doesn't try to fix me, who just loves me as I am. I tell her about my plans to start a nonprofit for families of missing persons, to provide resources and support and hope to people going through what we went through, and I watch the sunset, looking for that shimmer of light that tells me she's still there, still watching, still loving me from wherever she is. The house at 1428 Maple Street is gone, but its legacy remains, not as a curse, but as a reminder that love is stronger than darkness, that sacrifice matters, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of someone you love so they can finally be at peace. I found my sister on Halloween night, 20 years after she disappeared, and even though I had to lose her again, I gained something more valuable. The knowledge that she'd been a hero, that her sacrifice had saved countless lives, that she was finally, truly, free from the burden she'd carried for so long. That's the truth I carry with me now. The story I tell when people ask about the scar on my heart, about why I do what I do, about why I spend my life helping families find answers. My sister didn't vanish into nothing. She became something more. A guardian, a protector, a light in the darkness that will never go out. And every time I see an orange and purple sunset, I know she's still out there, still watching over me, still loving me across the vast distance between our worlds. That's enough. It has to be enough. And somehow, miraculously, it is. Because Iris taught me that love doesn't end with death, that sacrifice can be beautiful, that courage means doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. She taught me that some battles are worth fighting, even if you can't win them in the traditional sense. That sometimes victory looks like holding the line so others don't have to. That sometimes the greatest love is letting someone go so they can fulfill their purpose. I carry her with me every day. In the lavender soap I use. In the way I approach my work with determination and compassion. In the moments when I'm scared but do the brave thing anyway, because that's what she would have done. She's not gone. She's just transformed. Her love and courage taking a different form, protecting the world in ways most people will never know or understand. And I'm at peace with that. I'm at peace with her choice, with my choice, with the way our story ended and began again. Because this isn't really an ending, it's a transformation, a continuation of love in a different form. Iris is still my sister, still my hero, still the person I aspire to be. She's just doing her work from a different place now, and I'm doing mine here, and together, we're making the world a little bit safer, a little bit brighter, a little bit more full of hope. That's her legacy. That's what she died for. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure it was worth it, making sure her sacrifice meant something, making sure no other family has to go through what we went through. That's my promise to her, my way of saying thank you and I love you and I'll never forget you. Every sunset, every solved case, every family reunited with answers. That's me keeping my promise. That's me honoring my sister. That's me living the life she gave everything to protect. And it's enough. I want to know what you thought. Did the ending surprise you? Did you see it coming? Would you have done what Violet did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We've got so many more stories like this one coming your way, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And look, your next story is already appearing on the screen right now. Click on it, and let's keep going. I'll see you there.